Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ghosteas. I'm Maci.
And I'm Nadoly.
Today, we'll be talking about near-death experiences.
Scary stuff.
Something I've been interested in for a long time.
Yes, that show, I survived like Beyond and Back. Love both of those shows. They send me into a spiral, to be honest.
Oh my.
But I love them. I love them.
Yeah, I got into a binge of I Survived Beyond and Back a while back.
Like
And
a few months ago.
Yeah, same. It was a few months ago.
It was good.
Yeah, it's so good. There's so many really good stories on there. So basically, near-death experiences, for anyone who doesn't know, just a quick overview, and we'll kind of talk about it in more detail later, but it's just people who've experienced tragic accidents or illnesses, died, and came back to life. The experience in between the death and the life.
Right there with the title, Near Death.
They came close to death. Well, not really. There are some people who study this who say that it's not really a great term. It's not really all-encompassing in what it actually is. It's not a very good description.
Some of them do die. You flatline. You
Flatline.
No
For
brain activity,
minutes,
no nothing.
Long time.
Yeah.
Also, every week we're trying a new tea.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we are opting for using a tea bag rather than our loose leaf tea, but we're trying some Earl Grey. It's my favorite tea.
Yeah. I think I'm trying it, and then Macy's just having it.
Yeah,
I've never had it.
For
99% of these teas, I'm trying it, and Macy's just having it. But let's go. I really like that one. I really do.
So I wanted to start with a quick story. After a violent allergic reaction to pine nuts, Bryce collapsed and was rushed to a hospital. He remembered suddenly passing through a long tunnel toward a brilliant light. I hear a bark, and racing toward me is a dog I once had. A black poodle named Pepe. When I see him, I feel an emotional floodgate open. Tears fill my eyes. He jumps into my arms, licking my face. As I hold him, he is real, more real than I had ever experienced him. I can smell him, feel him, hear his breathing, and sense his great joy at being with me again. I put my dog down on the ground and step forward to embrace my stepfather when a very strong voice is heard in my consciousness. Not yet, it says. I scream out, why? Then this inner voice says, what have you learned and whom have you helped? I'm dumbfounded. The voice seems to be from outside of me as well as within. Everything stops for a moment. I have to think of what he's asked me. I cannot answer what I have learned, but I can answer whom I've helped. I feel this presence of my dog around me as I ponder those two questions. Then I hear barking and other dogs appear. Dogs I once had. As I stand there for what seems to be an eternity, I want to stay. The sensation of not wanting to come back is overwhelming. Bryce was also greeted by all of his relatives who had passed on before him. He experienced these loved ones as somewhat younger in form and face than when he had last seen them, healthier and happier. He remembered racing backward through the same tunnel he had entered when it was time to leave and reviving him in time to witness a hypodermic needle being plunged into his arm. I heard a voice say, welcome back. I never asked who said it, nor did I care. I was told by the doctor that I had been dead for over 10 minutes.
That one, I don't think you're going to be able to top it or make me cry or make me feel anything, because when you said the dog,
I knew that one would get you. That's why I started with that one, because it was beautiful.
I'm crazy, and don't shake your head.
You are.
And I think about death. I think about death a lot. I think about the death of other people more than myself. I think about the death of my dogs constantly. How I'm like, okay, well, if they go before me, like, I don't even know how I'm going to cope. I don't know what I'm going to do. And just hearing that is just like so.
It's comforting. I thought that would get you. And when you said I'm crazy, I thought you were going into I'm a crazy dog lady.
Oh, I am that too.
So
that
that's
as well.
I was like, yeah. But you're not crazy for thinking about death, because I also think about death often.
A lot. More than I should. But when I talk to you, you're like, me too. But when I talk to anybody else, they're like, what is wrong with you? I don't know. I'm like, when you think about death every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like, you take Tuesdays off. You're like,
I was about to say, what about Tuesday?
Tuesdays are fun days. You don't have to think about death on Tuesdays.
That is a quote.
Everybody's like, no, Ryan thinks I'm crazy because he'll be like, if I were to die, blah, 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 blah. He's like, why are you thinking about dying? I'm like, well, I'm not planning on it. I think about it.
Planning for the future. And there's a possibility that you could be dead in the future.
I mean, you will be.
So everyone will be, yeah, for sure.
But.
Okay, maybe I just don't talk to enough people because this is normal for me.
I know. Every time I talk to you, I feel seen. I feel heard. I fear that we're going to sound a bit strange.
It's
on
okay.
The pod, but if you're listening, you'll get it.
So, what is a near-death experience? We kind of already touched on it, but a kind of more well-rounded definition. It is the conscious, semi-conscious, or recollected experience of someone who is approaching or has temporarily begun the process of dying. So an experience that a person reports having had while in a physical state in which the risk of death is imminent. Death defined as the heart stopping. So when the heart stops, you stop breathing, your brain shuts down, it causes all processes of life to cease. It is speculated that near-death experiences arise as manifestation of psychopathology or fulfillment of prior expectations of dying process, although these hypotheses are contradicted by anecdotal data, and there have not really been very many systematic tests and studies. We'll get more into that later. And there's an estimated 9 million people just in the US who have experienced these.
Oh my God.
It happens a lot.
More than you would think.
More than you would think, for sure.
Wow.
People from all walks of life report having near-death experiences, even physicians, like medical doctors.
Yeah.
There are 4 types of near-death experiences. There's an initial experience, which involves elements such as a loving nothingness, a friendly voice, or a brief out-of-body experience. There's unpleasant or hell-like experiences, which is an encounter with a threatening void or stark limbo or hellish purgatory, or scenes of a startling and unexpected indifference, even hauntings from one's own past. There's pleasant or heaven-like experiences, which are the most common one. Heaven-like scenarios of loving family reunions with those who have died, reassuring religious figures or light beings, validation that life counts, affirmative and inspiring dialogue. And then there's transcendent experiences, which is exposure to otherworldly dimensions and scenes beyond the individual's frame of reference. Sometimes includes revelations of greater truths, and they seldom include personal content, really. There are actually people who study this. So actual doctors and people who devote their lives to this.
Actually, I think I did know that, because I think on Beyond and Back, there was a doctor that talked about that. Yeah. Which is insane. Whenever you talk about, like, I don't want to call this like outlandish, but outlandish things happening, and you hear that there are professionals that do this, it like makes it more real.
Yeah, and not like self-proclaimed professionals.
No, like literal medical doctors that this is their realm of study.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Which I don't know if this is an actual like class you take in medical school, but yeah, they dedicate 50 plus years to studying these kinds of things. There are 3 big names that I read about. There's many more, but these 3 are the ones that kept popping up over my research. There's Dr. Raymond Moody, Dr. Bruce Grayson, and Dr. Sam Parnia. So Raymond Moody is a medical doctor and doctor in psychology and philosophy. He actually coined the term near-death experiences when he wrote his book in 1975, Life After Life. These things happened for a long time, and he's the one that gave them a name that stuck. He recorded and compared the experiences of 150 people who died or nearly died and then recovered. And within these 150 plus people, he found 9 elements of near-death experiences that seemed really common. So they didn't always happen exactly the same. No near-death experience is the exact same as somebody else's, but they have the same kind of outline. Yeah. So there's usually a strange sound, a buzzing or ringing noise while having a sense of being dead. Some hear whistling, roaring, distant chimes, or even celestial music. A little orchestra playing as you ascend.
Wow.
There's peace and painlessness. While people are dying, they may be in intense pain, but as soon as they leave the body, the pain vanishes and they experience just overwhelming peace.
I think that's what I hear. Like, I've always heard from every story I've ever heard, is that as soon as it like happened, they just felt calm, they feel no bad, which I think is very reassuring, calming.
Then there's the out-of-body experience. The dying often have the sensation of rising up and floating above their own body while it's surrounded by a medical team and watching it down below while feeling just comfortable.
Speaking of that, have you ever heard there have been like studies where they weighed a body while they were dying and then they like weighed them after, or like, during the dying process, and they weighed like 3 or 4 ounces less. So you've never heard that?
No.
So like your soul has a weight.
I'm going to have to
you can
write this down
double check that to make sure that that's right. But I've seen stuff about it.
I did not know that. Okay, so then after the out-of-body experience, they usually experience something like going into a tunnel, being drawn into darkness through a tunnel at an extremely high speed until reaching a realm of radiant, golden white light. Also, although they sometimes report feeling scared, they do not sense that they were on the way to hell or that they fell into it or anything like that. Usually it's a just kind of light speed travel through.
On the way to see Morgan Freeman.
On the way to see Morgan Freeman.
When you say like the white light, the travel and everything, I think of, what is it, Bruce Almighty?
I think so.
And Morgan Freeman just comes around the corner. He's like, welcome. Honestly, if that's the way I have to go, I'll take it.
He is the universal voice of God, and I
think it's the most accurate.
I accept
if I
that.
had to guess.
When I read things like, and God spoke, I hear Morgan Freeman. So
me too.
It's a comforting voice. There's also a rising rapidly into the heavens. So if you don't go through the tunnel, there's also a sense of just rising in general. Sometimes even in the tunnel, they just feel like they're rising up. They just suddenly rise into the heavens and can see Earth from basically like from outer space sometimes. Another common occurrence is seeing people of light or beings of light. Once on the other side of the tunnel or after they've risen into the heavens, the dying people meet others that glow like with an inner light. They find that friends and relatives who have already died are there to greet them as well. So it's just lots of light and love and happiness that they find.
That's what I would like to believe would happen. That's what I've always felt
definitely
or thought.
believe that happens.
Yeah.
They usually meet these beings of light, like some call them angels, and then their relatives. And then there's usually an ultimate being of light, like a god, or some people refer to it as God or Jesus. After meeting the people that they, like their relatives and everything, the powerful spiritual being comes, and they don't ever say like, I am God, I am Jesus. It's just kind of a knowing.
It's like when you're in a dream and like if someone's in your dream and they don't look like that person, but you know they're that person, like you don't even have to say it. You just, you know.
Exactly. It's just they're a really powerful and comforting being that just comes in and they're just like, this is God.
Yeah. Now that I'm saying that, we need to do an episode about dreams.
Oh, dude, that's on the list. I already have that on the list.
That's interesting.
So usually this being has the most profound effect on individuals. The light appears dim at first and gradually grows so bright, reaching an unearthly brilliance, so brighter than the sun, but it doesn't hurt their eyes. They can still look at it. It's just gleaming bright, just something they can't even describe. And every person expressed that it was definitely a being, not just a light, and it definitely had a personality of love and warmth behind it. They're completely surrounded by it and feel at ease and drawn to it. And no matter who they identified the being as, depending on what religion they grew up as or practiced in, it was always thought of as a guide. The being began communicating with the person passing over, not by talking, but the spiritual body may pick up on thoughts of those around him. So it was kind of like telepathy.
Yeah,
that's how they communicate with everybody. And that's what I read a lot in all of the stories. They never speak out loud.
They don't walk up to you and be like, so you're dying. This is how we do it. They're just like, you get there and you know. You're falling in line. Everyone, you know what's going on.
Like their grandma will walk up and in their mind, they're just like, oh, grandma, I've missed you. And the grandma's like, I know. But like nothing is ever said between each other. And there's no chance of misunderstanding or lying to the light. They know everything. You know what they're trying to say to you. And there's here's a quote that I found from somebody's experience. The first thing he said to me was that he kind of asked me if I was ready to die or what I had done with my life that I wanted to show him. Not asked in a condemning way, not to accuse or threaten me, rather to make me think about my life. Asked not to acquire information, but help me proceed along the path to the truth, which I found interesting.
That's going to have me thinking later.
Yeah. After this question's asked, like, what have you done? What are you proud of? What can you show me? There's usually a life review, like kind of a
like life flashes before your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. The being of light presents the dying with a panoramic review of everything they've ever done. That is, they relive every act they have ever done to other people and come away feeling that love is the most important thing in life. Usually, typically, that's kind of the takeaway from their life. The things that they acquired, the jobs that they had, all of that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the love between themselves and the relationships they've had with other people.
You know what? I want to be positive, but I hope every person that has ever been rude to a customer service worker, I hope that they get to see what they've done.
They'll relive that.
I hope you know what you've done.
And I've seen in some of these that they go through and they feel their interactions, not from what they felt, but
how they made other people feel?
Yeah, from the other side. So like if you got into a fight with a person, you'd feel their pain.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I love that because that's what I always try to do. And that's why I always think like to be nice to other people, because I forget when I heard this. It was like people don't remember what was done. They remember how they felt. And so I always think about that. Like that if there's ever a misunderstanding with someone, if there's ever anything, I always think like, okay, so if they're thinking back to this later and they don't remember all the details, how did I make them feel? And I think about that constantly, all the time.
I think that's a good way to frame life.
And so that's comforting to me. I feel like I'm doing something right, you know?
So then after they've had this reel of their life and have met all of their family, the being of light sometimes tells them that they must return to the life, or they're given a choice of returning or staying, or there's a barrier that if they know that if they cross, there's no going back. Either way, they're usually really reluctant to return because there's just so much peace and happiness and joy surrounding them. But the people usually choose to return and do so only because of the loved ones that they don't wish to leave behind.
So do you think that there's always a choice?
I don't know. I thought about that a lot. That was one of my big questions. And I didn't know if I wanted to bring it up because it's a lot. But I don't know. And if there is, I don't know.
Because then that makes me think like, because, you know, religious people, most of the time they say like, oh, well, God needed them back. So it makes me think like, is that whatever higher power you believe in, did they decide, okay, we need you back? Or were they like, you could come back. So here's this thing. It's going to happen. Come up here and decide.
So I read
that
some
makes me think.
experiences where they get there and they're told it's not your time. You shouldn't be here. You have to go back. Goodbye.
So it was just a complete like, we have free will. So they did something and something happened.
Yeah, basically. So there are instances where they say it's not your time. So I guess if that's the case, we're never going to hear from the people who say,
the people that are like,
it's your time, come on. So I don't know. Maybe that's just for some people. They're given the choice. I don't know. I thought about that. I thought about that. This is a very heavy kind of subject. But anyway, following that. So the next, Dr. Bruce Grayson, he's a psychiatrist and he actually works for the School of Medicine at the University of Virginia. He runs this whole department of kind of studying this. And he says that 1 in 5 people who he interviews that have had experiences of cardiac arrest and had to be resuscitated usually claim to have had some degree of a near-death experience. And he's got a lot of information. There is too much for me to even read at this point, but he has he's seen so many people. And then there's Dr. Sam Parnia. He's a cardiologist and he works for the New York University Medical Center. Does a lot of research on this, has actually put out studies recently about this that are really interesting. So when these people are studying the claims of experiences, they usually try to verify reports using points like veridical reported data. So some of these reports have highly unusual or unique characteristics which are not part of ordinary resuscitations or hospital procedures. And people will come back and say that like, oh, I saw Nurse Joe bent down and tied her shoe. And they're like, there's no way you could have known that. Yeah. Additionally, some patients blind from birth report visual data accurately from their experiences during their clinical death. And these visuals are verified by hospital staff. So there's a story by psychiatrist Brian Weiss. This patient suffered a cardiac arrest during her stay in the hospital where I was the chairman of the psychiatry department. She was unconscious as the resuscitation team tried to revive her, and according to her later report, she floated out of her body and stood near the window watching. She observed without any pain whatsoever as they thumped on her chest and pumped air into her lungs. During the resuscitation, a pin fell out of the doctor's pocket and rolled near the same window where her out-of-body spirit was standing and watching. The doctor eventually walked over, picked up the pin, and put it back in his pocket. He then rejoined the frantic effort to save her, and they succeeded. A few days later, she told her doctor that she had observed the resuscitation team at work during her cardiac arrest. No, he said soothingly, reassuring her, you were probably hallucinating because the lack of oxygen to your brain. This can happen when the heart stops beating. She said, but I saw your pin roll over to the window. Then she described the pin and other details of the resuscitation. The doctor was shocked. His patient had not only been comatose during the resuscitation, she had been blind for many years. Which I think is really, really interesting.
That's a whole nother. I have so much to say about that, but I'll fall way off topic. Okay, I'll do it for a second. I forget who said this, but someone said this and it made me think about, do blind people like see in their dreams? Do deaf people have an inner monologue, inner dialogue, whatever? And it made me think like, I think about that and then like, I don't know.
And not all the blind people do.
Well, yeah, but like for them, like when they're dying, if they were born blind and so they've never really seen people or things, like they just die and they know what they're seeing. Like, I don't know. That's crazy.
I don't know. It's too much for me to.
Yeah, my brain. There's too much for my brain to even say what I'm trying to say, but I'm intrigued.
It's something else that they can verify: personal information about deceased individuals. So they'll go and have these experiences and come back and be able to tell people things about someone maybe they've never even met. There's no way they could have known this information. So what happens usually during a near-death experience? In one study, they placed EEG on patients receiving CPR for cardiac arrest, and of the patients that had interpretable data, they were able to see brain activity as much as 60 minutes into performing the CPR. We found the brain electrical markers heightened lucid consciousness, the same markers as you get in people who are having memory retrievals, who are having high order cognitive processes, except that this was occurring when the brain had shut down and would suddenly appear as a surge. So the same parts of the brain, it's really quick, and the same parts of the brain that are used to retrieve memories and like kind of high order.
Yeah, like when your life is flashing. So you're remembering all of your memories.
Yeah, so they actually have empirical data about this.
So cool. Mm-hmm. So I love the brain. I love learning about things that we do.
It is too much for me. But yeah, I do. It's very common for people to hear the other people around them declare them dead, and they have a heightened sense of self as they're floating. One patient said she floated out of the hospital and saw an old shoe up on the roof, and the nurse, she told later, found the shoe where like she could not have seen it before. I think her name was Maria. The patient's name was Maria. She couldn't have seen it where it was, and the nurse found it. Listed in a 2001 study by, I believe it was Dr. Sam Parnia, a man who had been in a deep coma told a nurse after waking that he recognized her, and he told her that he saw where she had placed his dentures during her resuscitation efforts, and then described the cart where she had placed them.
Oh my god.
And it was correct. Like, they found his dentures because of his out-of-body experience while he was in cardiac arrest.
That's insane.
They can basically sometimes float anywhere and see what's going on. So people floating and like, oh, I wonder what my sister's up to.
Mhm.
Oh, she's doing her grocery shopping.
100%. That would be me. 100%.
You're nosy.
I'd have to know what everybody's up to first, and then we can talk about what's
light
next.
will be there for me later.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They'll see their family members in other like parts of the hospital, maybe in the waiting room while they're having surgery. Remember the clothes that they were wearing, and that's verifiable later. So we've said that they can see family members that have passed. There was one example, a lady saw a baby brother she didn't know she had, and she spoke to this baby. He's like, I'm your brother. And she's like, no, you're not. I don't have a brother. He's like, yes, you do. And he had on these specific like baby clothes. And she went back and talked to her dad about it, and her dad got all teary-eyed and was like, the only people who knew about your baby brother were me, your mom, and the doctor, like what he was wearing and stuff.
Gosh.
So it was really beautiful.
Oh, I just got like chills.
And some people say that they get previews of what's to come, so like kind of visions of the future. I didn't look too much into that because it would have sent me down a path.
We can talk about some people seeing the future in a whole different episode.
Yeah. So we did talk about that there are good experiences, but there are also bad experiences.
I don't even want to know.
I didn't go into too much detail. It's somebody's suffering and potential lifelong eternity suffering, and I didn't want to go into detail too much, but just a quick kind of overview. Some experience a void when they have these experiences. They're just completely alone from everything and everybody. One man, Ken Vincent, referred to it as an existential hell. So it's just nothingness, and they are completely alone.
I think that's the scariest thing I've ever heard.
Then people describe scenarios that could easily be found in like the lower levels of Dante's Inferno. Hellish creatures and fire and demons and torture, terrible things. Not many people have reported negative experiences though, but we don't know if it's because no one wants to come back and be like,
hey, I think I'm going to hell.
I'm just gonna be sent to hell.
Yeah. Oh god.
And it terrifies some people, so
Yeah.
they just don't want to talk about it.
again.
Yeah, there's no telling whether or not people are experiencing these or not, but it's very rarely reported.
Mhm.
So there's one. I will tell one kind of hellish story, but it's not
Not too bad.
It's not the worst one that I read, and it was actually a group near-death experience. So
Oh.
some people claim to have experiences with other people in their vicinity. So
Oh, that's trippy.
so if they like are both dying, they'll have the
Mhm.
same or similar experiences and talk about it later. This one
Wow.
happened in a hospital in the late 60s in Boise, Idaho. The woman had suffered a heart attack. She was chalk white with fear, and while clinically dead, she claimed to have had this near-death experience. She floated out of her body and into a dark tunnel, headed through the tunnel toward a bright light ahead. She came to view a landscape of barren rolling hills filled, overflowing with nude, zombie-like people standing elbow to elbow, doing nothing but staring straight at her. She was so horrified at what she saw, she started screaming and snapped her back into her body, and she just continued screaming until she was sedated.
Oh my god.
As she relayed her story, she went on to declare death a nightmare, then cursed every church throughout all history for misleading people with rubbish about any kind of heaven. She was inconsolable.
Oh.
While she told the story, two other people entered the room, an elderly man and woman using walking canes. Individually, both had suffered heart failure too, and later revived after being declared dead. Both revealed substantially the same story as the lady previously. They were equally frightened. The three had found out about each other from nurses who had been comparing notes on patients and their strange hallucinations.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, if it was just her story at first, I was like, well, maybe her brain had a little, like,
Yeah.
that she saw something that she saw in a movie or something. But then the other two people,
Yeah.
that's horrifying.
They all had, it was basically the same
Oh, that's
picture.
scary.
Yeah.
Oh.
It freaked me out a little when I read it.
It's one of those things, like, I feel sick. I don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like to think too much about it either.
No, me
I read it and
neither.
I'm just like, okay. And it just
Let
let
it
it
go.
float away
I'm gonna be
because
thinking about this.
I like
as
the
soon as I
light.
go to bed.
I like the light. So there is a long recorded history of people experiencing these. Some say that the end of Plato's Republic, the story he shares of the myth of I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's ER. A warrior killed in battle is actually a near-death experience being retold. He was in battle, and 12 days later, he came back to life to tell that he had seen a mysterious place where others were judged for their deeds, and luminous beings descended from above with all the other soldiers he was in battle with. There's a 15th century painting. I'm not going to pronounce his name right, so I won't say it, but it's called Ascent with the Blessed. It's an image of people sitting, looking up at this tunnel of light, and there are these light beings walking through the tunnel. And it's really similar to what's described by some people in their experience. And then in 1740 is supposedly the first medically reported NDE, and it came from a military doctor from northern France. He describes a patient who lost consciousness after having too much blood drawn to treat a fever, which, interesting. The patient saw such a pure and extreme light that he thought he was in heaven, and affirmed that never of all his life had he had a nicer moment.
Oh.
And this was documented in his medical journals, so.
Insane how that happened, though. They were just taking blood, like, this will cool you down.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a treatment for fever in the 16th century, and I don't like it.
I don't like it either. But I like how every story, like, we're all just light.
Oh,
and I might sound crazy. People that believe in, like, auras and things like that, that's what it reminds me of. So, like, I wouldn't imagine that we're all just a white light, a yellow light. You know, like, is that what our aura is?
I don't know. I don't know too much about auras. The only thing I know about auras is from Baby Mama. Yeah.
When I look at some, it's not like I read auras, but when I look at some people, like, they give me a little gray.
That feels like a form of synesthesia.
Okay, well.
I don't know, maybe, because I don't know. I feel you.
Because you look at some people and you're like, oh, they are yellow. They are very light. They're bright. And then you see some people and you're like, you're gray.
You're evil.
No, not even evil, just you're gray. I can count a handful of people in my life that I know. There's gray.
There probably isn't any.
Could all just be a bunch of
science
hocus pocus, but
sounds like a lot of hoopla.
That's what I was looking for. I was gonna say hoopla, but I couldn't think of it.
So like I said, there are tons of stories of this. There are sites with catalogs of thousands of them. There are websites dedicated to taking these stories in and using that data for their studies, which some people have a problem with because it's just self-reported.
Just people telling a story if they want to. Yeah.
There are books written about people's experiences. There's movies. So like I said, there's Life After Life by Raymond Moody, which is a big one.
When you said that earlier, I thought about that, and then I thought about Cher.
Then there's Heaven is for Real, which was a really, really popular book. I read that book.
Movie.
And it turned into a movie. Yeah. It was really, really popular. It's about a 4-year-old boy who died during surgery and came back, and he traveled out of his body and went to heaven and back. He said he saw the doctors performing surgery. He saw his family sitting in the waiting room crying. He says he went to heaven and he saw Jesus. He said it was a great time. He went back and told his family, and there was even they said that he saw an artwork of another girl who had a near-death experience and saw Jesus, and he pointed to that girl's picture and was like, that is the dude. That's Jesus. That's who I saw. There were reports that he came out later and said he made it all up. But
because weren't they like a super religious family to begin with?
Well, usually the people that write the books are super religious to begin with.
Yeah. So. I don't know if I would believe in the one image that what Jesus looks like. You know what I mean?
Jesus was a real person.
Well, yes, I know, but like I feel like he may have gotten skewed in the years, like people like representing what he looks like. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so
yeah.
I feel like
it's not like he saw every representation of Jesus and was like, yep, that's him. It was like this girl's specific artwork of him.
I thought it was
of
like
what
he
she
saw like the
I know what you mean.
Picture of Jesus. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. He was like, yeah, I saw him, because then I'm like, a 4-year-old.
No, it was this girl who had a near-death experience and drew who she saw as Jesus. And he said, that's exactly what he looks like.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Then there's another one that was really popular and later made into a movie starring Jennifer Garner, I think, was in it, called Miracles in Heaven. It detailed the experience of a young girl with chronic, like a digestive illness, and she experienced like excruciating pain forever. She fell from a tree like 30 feet up and apparently hit her head a few times on the way down. Claimed that she went to heaven and saw Jesus, and he told her that she needed to go back, but she'd be healed. And she came to and was healed. She went from taking like...
This is real?
30, yeah. Went from taking like 30 medications a day to none.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And was basically uninjured from her fall too.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't read the book. I didn't watch the movie yet, but that's what kind of the little synopsis online.
I think I want to watch the movie.
I want to watch it just for Jennifer Garner.
Yeah.
Honestly. And then something that I didn't connect to this until I was doing this research. Soul on Disney.
I've never seen it.
Really?
Never seen it because I heard it made people cry. And when it came out, I didn't have the strength to cry at another Disney or Pixar movie. Because there's something about those movies.
They just hit you and they're
because they know what
deep
they know what
within
they're
your
doing.
heart.
They know what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Well, it's a really good one.
I'll watch it eventually.
So people who have these near-death experiences usually come back greatly changed, wanting to do good for themselves and others, being more loving. A lot of them find religion and become more spiritual. There are people who are completely atheist who have these experiences and come back and they're like, there's no way there's nothing out there. There's no way. And they believe it so deep within themselves that it is the truth.
Yeah.
That they just know. And most of them are no longer afraid of death anymore, too.
Yeah.
They actually welcome it. They're like, when my time comes, it's here and I'm ready.
I've never been afraid of death. This sounds so bad. I'm just afraid of missing out.
You...
Like, my FOMO is so bad that when I think about me dying, I'm like, what are y'all gonna do without me?
Sitting up in heaven watching us play games.
Salty, angry that I'm missing out. And I think about it, it's so bad. It's such a bad way to think about it. If I died, like right now, if Ryan moved on, what are you doing? And people, like, I say it all the time.
That's a whole
like,
nother story.
people would be like, she would want you to be happy.
No, you wouldn't.
When did I say that? Why are you speaking for me? Because I wouldn't. I want you to be happy alone. Sounds so bad. And that's why I'm afraid of dying.
No, you'll be stuck on Earth, haunting everyone.
I've said it. I would. So if I ever die, just know I'm here.
Give me a sign. We'll have to think of something. Like, what can you do?
I don't know.
Something pertaining to...
I've thought about it before, and people are like, oh, a cardinal, a butterfly. I don't think I'm one of those.
I want something a little more...
I'm a rat.
I don't want a rat in
I'm
my
a
house.
rat in your kitchen. No.
Please, for the love of God.
No.
Okay, if a rat eats my tea after you die, I will know it's you.
No, I'm not a rat. I don't know. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, let's think of something.
We'll talk.
You'll have to give me a sign, and I'll give you a sign too. It's a pact.
I don't plan on dying, and I hope you're not. But
same. But like we said, we think about it. Anyway, some scientists dispute that NDEs can be explained as changes in brain function during the process of dying. Out-of-body experiences could be accounted for by the disruption of the temporal parietal region of the brain, key to the sense of embodiment. The tunnel imagery may be due to the effects of slowed down blood flow to the retinas. There are some drugs that can cause similar effects as seen during an NDE that we talked about. There's DMT, LSD, and ketamine. Jesus. All kind of elicit similar experiences. There are theories that the body releases DMT when near death, but those are not established. There's no substantial proof of that.
No, but I always think of that, like my psychology brain. I'm always thinking like,
what hormone, what chemical?
Yes, like what part of the brain? Like when
on?
We're gonna figure this out eventually. Like there's something.
Oh yeah, I feel like the scientists discussing this now are
pioneering.
Yeah, pioneering.
Yes.
They're gonna lead to. We're gonna have some kind of new technology come through, and we'll figure it out one day. But some say that ketamine is the closest effects, like closest to NDEs. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. It causes kind of like hallucinations almost that mimic really closely to this. Some object and say that out-of-body experiences can be explained like sleep paralysis, where your brain still thinks you're in REM sleep and you're partially awake, but none of this is proven. Basically, people say that it's an extremely complex hallucination.
Yeah.
It's kind of the more widely accepted.
I would accept that if there weren't so many stories that were almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
And people that have never met each other.
The objectors say that it's because we're all human and we all have the same human experience, but I don't know. I don't buy it. It's not enough for me.
Because humans are humans, but I think we're all very different.
Yeah, I agree. We all have two
There's no
different
coincidence.
lives.
There's no coincidences. Like,
yes, like we've already said, yeah.
They're all seeing the same thing, so I'm thinking it's something beyond the brain.
There was a small study, and it was determined that the occurrence of NDEs is not influenced by psychopathology, by religious denomination, or religiosity. So they kind of took these objections, and were like, okay, well, how can we measure this? And found that there really wasn't a correlation between these. And there was another study published in The Lancet that reported the likelihood of having one was not related to the level of the lack of oxygen to the brain. So that was kind of debunked. And the amount of preceding fear or the type of medication they were taking.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Kind of debunked.
I was going to say something about that earlier because like whenever you were talking about near-death experience, like people doing this, you kept mentioning stuff. It was like their heart stopped. There was never much of like you said like, oh, there was no brain activity or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Well, because usually when the heart stops, the breathing stops, then the brain stops.
Yes.
And so it's kind of all like a domino effect.
Yeah. But I'd be very interested to see like people with like where the trauma starts in the brain, if they had a different experience than if it started somewhere else and then their body shut down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So actually, the cells in your body, it was found they don't die when you die. Or the cells in your brain don't exactly die when you die. So there's a 2019 study that showed in pigs, even when the heart had ceased functioning and the lungs were no longer working, the brain cells being deprived of oxygen, those underlying cells, they don't die for hours and possibly even days.
Oh,
So
I expected a few minutes.
yeah, this is in pigs, so not
could be
humans,
different.
but studies showed that your brain cells were still working, and actually that the reintroduction of oxygen is what usually or can sometimes start the process of everything really dying, like your brain cells dying. So this was a quote that I got from Dr. Bruce Grayson. He said, "There have been reports of people experiencing near-death episodes while their brains are inactive, yet that's when they say they have the most vivid experiences of their lives. Are these the final moments of consciousness or the beginning moments of the afterlife? It seems most likely to me that the mind is somehow separate to the brain, and if that's true, maybe it can function when the brain dies. But if the mind is not there in the brain, where is it and what is it?"
So I, again, at the chance of sounding crazy, this goes back to when I started really working out and taking care of my body and stuff. I used to get so in my head about it, but then I started thinking like, okay, this is my like vessel. This is not me. This thing that you're seeing, this is not me. This is my skin suit. But like who I am is my soul. Is like, I'm this little ball of light is how I see it too. That's who I am. This, what I'm moving around in right now, this is just my vessel.
Yeah, there was a quote that actually kind of relates to this that I found interesting. I literally put it in interesting info, like in case I wanted to tell you whether it be here or after. It says, "It's more like the brain is receiving and interpreting the mind, kind of like how a television set will receive signals from outside and then flip to the channel you want to watch and translate that for us so we can see the images in color and sound." So if your mind is communicating with deceased loved ones and with deities, that doesn't help you survive in the physical world. The brain would normally filter those things out and just let in the important stuff. And so when you die, your brain just kind of, your mind, I guess, kind of opens up to and is able to receive all the other input, the stimuli around.
That's interesting.
Which I thought was trippy.
That's a deep thought. Yeah, I'm going to have to think about that one.
There's a lot of thinking going on in this episode. I'm sorry if you're not prepared to think.
I didn't think I was going to think this much. I thought you were just going to be like,
I told
and
you.
I saw my mother, and I was gonna be like, oh.
No, I told you this was
very informative.
Yeah. Essentially, to kind of wrap it up, I have one more story, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts in the most basic form because it could go on forever. But personally, I think it's very interesting that people over many centuries have had very similar experiences.
Like the same thing.
Yes, the same thing happening from the first century to now. We have vastly different lives, vastly different experiences, and we're still kind of experiencing the same thing.
So what I think is, obviously civilization and us, the people on Earth, we are constantly evolving, changing, sometimes for the better, you would think. But I think we're all just souls, and if we get put in this time frame, whatever, it's like, it doesn't matter. We're all just those little balls of light. And we could talk about past lives and reincarnation things. I really want to get into that. That's going to be probably like maybe even a two-parter because I have so much to say and that I know there's so much. But yeah, I think we see the same thing because we are just a little gumball in a gumball machine. That's our little souls. And we're all just, someone puts the quarter in and we get the body, the skin suit that we're assigned. Yeah. I do think that. So
it's an interesting thought.
We're all just a gumball at the end of the day.
I like that. I like that this isn't it.
Yeah.
And I very much believe this isn't it. We will go on to bigger, better, greater heaven and goodness. Personally, this is proof to me. And some may not think so, and that's totally fine. You can have your own opinion, and I accept that because I accept that there are some things that just maybe we'll be able to explain it later. But this, as we stand right now, this is proof to me that there is an afterlife.
I think so.
Sure.
Regardless of what it is, I just think that there's no way that there's nothing.
No.
Like the people that think there's nothing, there's no way.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you believe in, whether that's God, whether that's whatever, anything else. I can't list all the things. It's late right now. But there is something. There's no way that there's nothing. So if there is something, because if Earth is it, I'm going to be pissed.
No. There's definitely more beyond this.
Yeah.
So this is an account of a child named Lynn, who at the age of 13 underwent open heart surgery to correct a condition she had since birth. This happened, there was no date on it, but it happened sometime during the Vietnam War. The last thing I remember in surgery was a male voice saying in a very matter-of-fact way, "Uh-oh, we have a problem here." The next thing I knew, I was floating around the ceiling looking down on my body. My chest was open wide, and I could see my internal organs. I remember thinking how odd it was that my organs were a beautiful pearl gray, not at all like the bright red chunks in the horror flicks I love to watch. I also noticed there was a black doctor on the operating team. I'd met the operating team the day before, but they were all white. I had to move on, so I floated into the waiting room where my parents were. My father had his head buried in my mother's lap. He was kneeling at her feet, his arms wrapped around her waist, and he was sobbing. My mother was stroking his head, whispering to him. The scene shocked me, as my father was not prone to showing emotions. Once I realized they would be fine, I felt myself pulled into a horizontal tunnel. The ride through the tunnel was like nothing else, I remember thinking. So this is death. The tunnel was dark, and every once in a while, something that looked like lightning would flash across my path. These flashes were brilliant in color and didn't scare me. At the end of the tunnel was a bright light. From the light came 2 dogs of mine. One was a collie named Mimi, who had died 3 years previously from an infection, and the other was a boxer named Sam, who had died 2 years before after being hit by a car. The dogs came running and jumped on me and kissed my face with their tongues. Their tongues weren't wet, and I felt no weight when they jumped on me. The dogs seemed to glow from a light that was inside them. I recall saying to myself, "Thank you, God, for letting my dogs be alive." I hugged my dogs as tight as I could. I then called my dogs, and together we started walking toward the light. All colors were in the light, and it was warm, a living thing, and there were people as far as the eye could see, and they were glowing with an inner light just like my dogs. In the distance, I could see fields, hills, and a sky. The light spoke and it said, "Lynn, it is not time for you to go yet. Go back, child." I put my hand up to touch the top of the light. I knew then that I had touched the face of God. I told God that I loved him and I wanted to stay with him. Again, the light said, "Lynn, go back. It is not time for you. You have work to do for me. Go back." I know this sounds silly, but I asked the light, "If I go, can I come back and will my dogs still be here waiting for me?" The light said yes, and then told me there were people who wanted to see me before I left. From out of the light came my maternal grandparents. I ran to them and embraced them. They were going to walk me part of the way back. Just as I am turning to leave, a man stepped from the light. He wore a full dress uniform, U.S. Navy. He was very tall and very blonde, with blue eyes. I had never seen the man before, but he knew me and smiled. "I am your Uncle Franklin. Tell Dorothy that I'm okay and that the baby is with me. Tell her I never stopped loving her and that I'm glad she got on with her life. Tell her that when her time comes, I will come for her. Remember to tell her I love her." My grandparents told me if I stayed any longer, I might not make it back, but I wanted to talk with Jesus. I had a very important question to ask him. A beam of light, different from, yet similar to the first one, covered me. I knew this light was Christ. I leaned against it for one moment and then asked my question. "Dear Jesus, is it true that you gave me this heart condition so that I would have a cross to carry like you did? Sister Agnes, my sixth grade teacher, had told me that my heart condition was my cross to bear from Christ." I heard the voice of Christ vibrate through me as he said, "No, this heart condition of yours is not a cross for me, for you to bear. This heart condition is a challenge to help you grow and stay compassionate. Now go back." I saw people hiding in the tunnel, people who were afraid to come into the light and who were disoriented about where they were. I expressed concern for them, but was told not to worry, as a guide would be along to help them. Lynn detailed what it was like to be resuscitated and then wake up hours later hooked up to a myriad of tubes. She recalls being unable to speak, and her doctors released her after a month. The day I left, in front of my parents, I asked Dr. Davidson who the black doctor was in the operating room. Dr. Davidson said he had been called in at the last minute when one of the team members became ill. He wanted to know if the doctor had been by to say hi, but I said no, I saw him during surgery. Dr. Davidson stopped smiling and told me to go home and forget everything. I asked my Aunt Dorothy at the following Thanksgiving, "Who is Franklin?" There was silence. Every eye at the table was on me. Mouths were wide open, and Uncle George, who was married to Aunt Dorothy, looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Lynn, if you wanted to hurt me, you've done a good job." So everyone went home. A few weeks later, my aunt wanted to know how I knew about Franklin. I told her exactly what happened during surgery. Then my aunt led me up to the attic and unlocked a large trunk. I had never been in her attic before, nor had I seen the trunk. She pulled out pictures of the man I had seen in the light. My aunt told me that she had married Franklin during World War II after a brief 24-hour courtship. She had been engaged to Uncle George at the time, but left him for Franklin. So that's why George was mad. My aunt started to cry as she told me that she and Franklin were very happy together for 2 months, and then he was shipped out. After he left, she discovered she was pregnant. When she was 7 months along, my aunt received word that Franklin had been killed in the invasion of Italy. He was on the lead ship dropping off troops. The news caused her to miscarry, and she hemorrhaged so badly that a complete hysterectomy had to be performed to save her. The next year, Uncle George married her and destroyed all the pictures of Franklin, requesting that everyone in the family never speak of Franklin's name again. She knew all of that.
That's the end?
Yep, that's the end. I mean, she went on with her life, but...
Oh my god. Where'd you get this? She write like,
This was in a book. I can't remember which book it was.
but it's like a compilation of
retellings, of people's stories.
Oh my God, I loved that one.
Yeah, pulled the heartstrings.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about the dogs again.
No, I wanted to add dogs because I knew it would get you.
Yep, I'm got. Yeah, it's beautiful. The Franklin thing was kind of like tea, but like that was sad.
Yeah, it's sad but crazy and comforting for Dorothy and wild stuff. She knew all this without ever being told.
I feel good now. That was a good one to end on.
Thanks for listening. If you're still here,
it was a more informative type. It wasn't just us talking about our thoughts.
Stories. Yeah. Felt like it needed to because beforehand,
there's a lot.
I didn't know there was so much research.
No,
I literally
neither.
thought it was just like a bunch
of
people who were like, I did this too.
Yes.
No, there's like actual research on this.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting and I could not.
I did too.
I'm sorry. I'm a very research-oriented person and I cannot.
I like to learn. So
cut things out.
Yeah, I liked this.
But we're glad you listened. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll be putting out new YouTube videos and podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts every Monday. So you'll be hearing from us weekly. You can check us out on YouTube and Instagram at Ghosteas Pod. Please rate and review our podcast wherever you're listening and let us know what you think. Constructive criticism.
Only constructive.
If you're not already, be sure to check us out in video form on YouTube, as I mentioned, and don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all the things. Share if you feel compelled. If you have a creepy encounter, anything you can't explain, please send it in to us. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to share if you're willing to let us share on a future episode.
But even if you're not, I still want it.
We still really want to read them. We love stuff like this, obviously. So you could just send us a DM or email us at ghostespod@gmail.com. And yeah, that's all we've got for today.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.